before we proceed with our plenary talks, I wanted to highlight that today our schedule is slightly adjusted in a different way than the rest of the days. So for the next hour or so, we will have the plenary talks. And then we will have, followed by a half an hour networking session and poster session. Then, as Samir mentioned, we will have all the parallels. Our keynote speaker for today will be addressing, make her address at 5:30 UTC after our parallel sessions. And that will be followed, the keynote talk will be followed by participant sessions and meetings, also run by our keynote. So please stay tuned for after our parallel sessions for our follow-up, our plenary session B, if we can call it like this, at 5:30. Without further ado, I would like to call our first plenary talk of the day. Our colleague Andrew Fraknoi will be with us live, and we'll talk about training early career astronomers for effective outreach, the AAS Ambassadors Program. Andrew, welcome. It's a pleasure having you, and please, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, and thanks for listing my long title. Let me now see if I can share my slides. I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to go to my, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Good. All right, so I'd like to talk about a project at the American Astronomical Society where we began to do what is the purpose of this meeting, to train people to be more effective at public outreach. This project comes from the idea that for the public, astronomy is the gateway drug, we hope, to an addiction in science. The project was originally a legacy of American Astronomical Society President Deborah Elmer-Green's presidency. She asked how we can train the next generation to be better at public outreach. We have tremendous help from the AAS staff, including Rick Feinberg, whom you see here. The idea behind it is that science suffers from its lack of a culture of explanation. We are trained in graduate school to be excellent at research, and very little training is devoted to explaining our work to the public. And so people who are interested in outreach, like all the attendees at this conference, often feel isolated in their departments and at meetings, and we wanted to deal with that as well. The American Astronomical Society selected the Astronomical Society of the Pacific to carry out the project. Three of us were the leaders of this program. Dennis Schatz, who was for a long time at the Pacific Science Center and became the first astronomer in United States history to be elected as president of the National Science Teaching Association. And then on my right, you see Susie Gerton, who was at the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, but is now in charge of education and outreach for the National Radio Astronomy Observatories in the United States. We also had help from a number of people at the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, including Executive Director Linda Shore, Greg Schultz, and Anna Hurst, who were very much involved in the production of these workshops. What we did was to hold 2-day intensive workshops at that is before the meetings of the AAS. And over the course of the last 9 years, we've trained more than 250 early career astronomers all over the United States. We consider them our secret agents for the cause of outreach. They are being planted in astronomy institutions around North America, and our hope is that as they get more senior, they will consider education and outreach as a legitimate part of every astronomer's portfolio. For example, we already have a number of people in faculty positions like Aumawa Shields, who's at the University of California, Irvine, and has already begun a wonderful program for young girls to become interested in science early. During these workshops, these 2-day workshops, we devote a lot of time to doing hands-on astronomy activities, like this cash register tape model of the solar system, which is very effective in public programs. We also teach the participants how not to use PowerPoint. I'm sure you've all suffered through incomprehensible presentations with unreadable slides like I'm showing you here. And not doing that on PowerPoint is a really important part of how you become a better communicator. We teach our participants how to put things in lay language. So many scientists, after they come out of graduate school, are not conversant with providing lay language explanations for astronomical phenomena. So we train them and we give them opportunities to practice with each other during these 2-day intensive workshops. Our hope is to build an outreach community in person as the 25 or so ambassadors get to know each other during these training workshops. Then there is a specific website devoted to resources and communication among the astronomy ambassadors. And there's also an Astronomy Ambassadors Facebook page. The idea is that as these ambassadors go back to their institutions and begin to do outreach projects, they will often say, oh my goodness, I need help. I've never done this kind of outreach. I've never talked in front of this kind of group. Does anyone else in the project have any experience with this? What do you think I should do? What's the best activity to carry out? And so there will be a wealth of experience between the trainers and past trainees to help new people in the program if they're running into trouble or if they're scared about some activity they have to do. With this program, we developed a menu of outreach opportunities for science education, a whole library of outreach activities and resources, which is shortened the MOOS. And the MOOS is available on the American Astronomical Society website under education. It's available to anyone, not just participants in the program. After we had a good number of participants go through this and a few years had passed, we did a survey of participants, and here are a few of the results. Prior to taking the workshop, 82% of the participants reported little or no confidence in their awareness of outreach resources in astronomy. After the workshop, we're pleased to say 100% of the participants said they were confident that they knew where outreach resources could be located. So that was a nice result. 90% of the participants reported a positive change in their confidence and ability to communicate their research as compared to before the workshop. We actually had them practice giving what we call an elevator talk, where they had to, in a few minutes, explain their research and why it's important to the world. Prior to the workshop, 18% reported confidence in finding ways to and strategies to forge community partnerships. After the workshop, 85% reported feeling confident in being able to have such strategies with their community groups. One person wrote, and we were very touched by this, the ambassador program completely changed how we as a department did outreach. We implemented many of the activities that we learned at the workshop into our routine outreach, and they are now staples of what we do. And this is the kind of subversive result that we are hoping for in helping departments become more ready for outreach. Now the Astronomical Society of the Pacific has received a new grant from the National Science Foundation to develop a program they call on-the-spot feedback. The purpose is to give scientists tools to monitor how their audiences are feeling and understanding during their presentation or whatever activity they're doing. Often we go on, but we have no idea how well the audience is doing. And this is to develop ways to be in touch with your audience. How do we know whether the audience is with you? We are designing strategies to use right during the event to make audience thinking and interest visible to the presenter. And already there are a number of ideas, and a manual is being developed for how you can get immediate feedback for your presentation. It's especially important to make adjustments if your audience isn't with you. Look at the gentleman in the middle of the picture there. And there are ways to bring the audience back to where you want them to be. And we're creating materials, videos, and online resources to make this available, not just to the participants, but eventually to everyone in the outreach community. So you can find more information about the Ambassadors Program at the American Astronomical Society Education website. You can email me directly if you have questions that you're not able to ask in this presentation. And we would very much welcome other organizations and astronomical societies who would like to duplicate this project. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides at this point, come back to the main meeting, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And indeed, we already have a few questions from our audience here today with us. Thank you again for being with us. From our colleague, Madi, wants to ask how we can communicate with you and share your activities. He finds this a great idea, and they would like to help and hopefully join.
Excellent. So the easiest thing right now is to email me at the address I showed, fraknoi@fhda.edu. I'm pretty much the only astronomer named Fraknoi in the entire world, so it's not hard to find me if you didn't write that down. So just look for my webpage, which is fraknoi.com, and you can communicate with me, and I'm happy to put you in touch with the materials and with the organizers.
Thank you so much, Andrew. We are also receiving some, will there be, this is from our colleague Nurul, that is asking, will there be an online programs in the future for AAS?
Well, we try to do this in person because it's an intensive 2-day workshop where we actually bring a lot of materials, hands-on materials, and we have them work together in groups. So we do all kinds of updates and further activities on Zoom, but we much prefer to do this in person. And we hope the next workshop will be at the winter 2022 meeting of the American Astronomical Society in Salt Lake City. But if there are groups around the world who might like this kind of training by Zoom, we can discuss whether we might be able to help you in some way. So again, get in touch with me if you're interested. And the materials are certainly available, and I can make sure that you know where to get all the materials.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And we still have a few minutes before the end of our time, so I would take advantage, address our colleague Adrienne's question on do you draw on Carl Sagan's work?
Do we draw on Carl Sagan? Well, Carl Sagan was a big inspiration to me personally. I think he was one of the most skilled interpreters of astronomy. And what I think he did especially well, which we train our young people to pay attention to, is to be aware of both the knowledge and the feelings of the audience. Audiences, even if they don't know very much astronomy, like to be taken seriously. And there was no one better than Carl Sagan in making the questioner feel like he was taking them seriously. Even if they asked what astronomers would consider a dumb question, Carl was excellent at making them feel like they were important and their question mattered. And in discussions with our young people, I think that's a really important point. One of the key things we teach them, for example, is not to use the word obviously. Whenever we say something simple to our colleagues, we put the word obviously with it because we want our colleagues to know that we know this is simple stuff. The public doesn't need to ever hear the word obviously when you're doing public outreach. Nothing is obvious to a beginner, and it just insults them to hear that. And again, Carl Sagan and people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Patrick Moore and many people around the world who are our heroes were very good at this. making sure that the audience felt that they were at their level.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Time for one last question, this time from our colleague Tilina, that says, nice effort, Andrew. I assume that the training was designed for the pre-pandemic era. Did you change the training to include how to do outreach virtually?
So we did. We talked quite a bit with the ambassadors about doing outreach. We had webinars where we discussed what the ambassadors were doing. And in the forums where the ambassadors meet, there were a lot of notes and discussions about, oh my God, now what do I do? Because how do I do a coffee thing over the web? And how can we possibly duplicate the fun of having a personal gathering? And so people compared notes, and we tried to help them to move to an online world. And all of us continue to struggle with this and only hope that the COVID will one day leave us and we can go back to meeting in person.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and thanks to all our colleagues for posing their questions. I appreciate your time, and I would invite you to stay with us, and if there, in the meantime, there are more questions, to please address them in our plenary Q&A, and to interact with our participants in a written format in our chats, and of course through, as I mentioned, the Q&A. And of course, our participants to reach out to our presenters, to take this opportunity to engage as much as you can with Andrew and with other presenters. Thank you again so much, Andrew.
Thank you.
And our next talk will be a contribution from Shigeyuki Karino, and he will talk a little bit about the contribution of astronomy for the fulfilling life of the elderly citizens. This will be a pre-recorded talk, so I would ask my colleague to play the video, if possible. Samir, we don't have audio.
Yeah.
I believe you need to unmute.
Okay, before starting, I'd like to have.
Thank you. Please hold on.
Of course. And in the meantime, I want to thank to Karino-san for joining us today live. So after the presentation, the pre-recorded presentation, he will answer all of your questions. So please do post them on our plenary Q&A, and Karino-san will be with us to answer them. Thank you so much. Samir, ready when you are.
Yes, we are ready. Please switch off your videos. Thanks.
Thanks, organizers, for giving me such a great chance to present our study in front of a worldwide audience. I'm Shige Karino from Kyushu Sangyo University in Japan, and this work has been done with my collaborator Takako Otabe. Today, I would like to talk about the contribution of the astronomy on the lifelong education for senior citizens. In recent years, the declining birth rate and aging population have become major problem, especially in developed countries. In particular, with the development of medical care, the number of healthy senior people is increasing. For example, in Japan, half a century ago, the number of elderly people was small and young generation made up the majority of the population. Half a century later, however, more than 40% of the population is expected to be over 65 years old. In order for the healthy elderly to live a full life, the government needs to provide them with opportunities for activities. After their retirement, senior citizens have enough time. The way to spend the time is quite important to make their life with satisfaction. In this context, lifelong education plays an important role. Previous researches have shown that improving education for the senior citizens can not only improve the quality of life of the senior citizens, but can also prevent their isolation. And it is considered that these effects finally make the society better. In such education systems for senior citizens, there must be something that astronomy can make contribution. However, learning and education for the elderly differ greatly from education for the younger generations, such as schooling and vocational education, in several ways. For example, the motivation and purpose of learning for the senior is very different from that of formal education. In school education and vocational education, students can learn knowledge and abilities necessary for social life. For example, in school education, younger students learn how to read, write, do mathematics, learn about society and economics, and how to use computers and so on. However, for senior learners, the goals of the learning are completely different. In fact, for the elderly, learning itself is the purpose of the learning. We also need to consider the method of learning. For astronomy education, star party is one of the effective methods, but senior citizens often have problems in their eyesight and physical strength, so safety must be taken into consideration. On the other hand, senior citizens have great knowledge and ability to evaluate something. Therefore, it is necessary to develop educational programs that take into account the characteristics of these senior citizens. In order to establish an effective educational program for senior citizens, we started to investigate how astronomy can contribute to the learning of the senior people. In particular, we have started investigating the reason why the senior citizens learn. Our goal is to find out the motivations and needs for learning, and to examine how astronomy can fit into these needs. There have been several previous studies on the learning needs of the seniors. For example, classically, it is well known that there is a transcendence need in the learning of seniors. This is the need to relate one's life to the past and the future, and is explained as a reason why senior people prefer to study history and literature. Also, one of the unique learning needs for the senior people is the connection need, which is a need to connect with other senior people and different generations. However, past studies have not assumed that the elderly would study natural sciences such as astronomy. Therefore, we are investigating whether astronomy fits the learning needs and motivations of the senior citizens. Here, we would like to introduce the results of our preliminary survey. We conducted a questionnaire-based survey of the participants of the series of astronomy courses offered to senior citizens in Japan. Unfortunately, because of COVID-19, in last year, we had to limit the number of participants of the lectures, so the sample size was not large. However, we have obtained some meaningful results for the guideline in the future works. First, we asked the participants in our course of astronomy for senior citizens about their feeling about learning. There are many more items actually, but we have selected only the most important ones here. For each of these items, the participants were asked to indicate how much they're feeling on each item on a 4-point scale. The right column shows the average scores. The results indicate that the senior learners in the astronomy course enjoy the learning itself more than the making connections and practical benefits. Another question asked what topics they would like to learn about. For each of 20 options, the participants were asked to indicate the level of interest on a 4-point scale. Subjects shown by red are that got high scores, while blue-colored subjects are not popular in this investigation. Since this questionnaire is for participants who have taken astronomy course, it is not surprising that astronomy has the highest score. Based on this result, we will examine the correlation between each subject rather than the score. We calculated the cross-correlation coefficient of how the participants scored on these 20 learning subjects. Of course, you need not follow each scores in the diagram below. Anyway, it is important that there are several pairs of subjects that show highly correlated each other. Those with high correlation coefficients were considered to be closer or similar to each other in terms of the learning needs of the elderly. Then, based on these correlation coefficients, we made cluster analysis. Here, we show the result. We set the threshold at an appropriate point and classified these 20 subjects into several groups. As a result, based on the learning motivations of the senior learners, we have categorized these 20 subjects into 6 groups as below. That is, subject groups of hobbies, volunteer activities, internet and computer, astronomy and natural sciences, artistic activities, and others. Next, we check the correlation of the learning motivations with the groups of elderly learning subjects that we have just categorized. Again, it is not necessary to check the numbers in this diagram. But the important point is that the result shows that some of the subjects have a strong correlation with specific motivations of senior learners. Here, I show the summary of our analysis. The figure below shows the strongest correlations. This shows that those who answered, "I want to enjoy studying itself," and "I want to think about the meaning of life through learning," tend to prefer to study astronomy and natural sciences. On the other hand, those who want to apply what they learn to their lives, and those who want to connect with other participants through learning, do not seem to be interested in astronomy. Thus, it is clear that astronomy is well suitable for the senior learners who find meaning in learning itself. On the contrary, astronomy does not attract those who seek practical benefits from learning. In addition, from the free descriptions in the questionnaire, although we have not examined in detail, it seems possible that there is a change in the behaviors in the senior participants after learning about astronomy. And it is interesting that most of them answered that they want to continue their studies. It may be possible that astronomy can contribute to keep the learning motivations of senior citizens. We would like to investigate this possibility in detail in the future works. Okay, the pilot study revealed the motivation for the senior citizens to study astronomy. In other words, astronomy is an attractive subject for those who enjoy learning itself. On the other hand, people who want to think about the meaning of life through learning also seem to have a motivation to study astronomy. Contrary, astronomy does not seem to be attractive to those who seek connection with other participants or those who seek practical benefit. In this study, we found a certain relationship between the learning needs of the senior citizens and astronomy. In the future, we plan to study the astronomy education curriculum to meet the learning motivation of the seniors, and to study the astronomy education contents that can be safely taken by the seniors. Okay, I stop here. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Karino-san, and I would like to invite you to the stage to join us and to answer a couple of questions by our viewers. And the first one that I would like to address is from our colleague Kelly, that asks, experiment with different styles and different modalities.
Okay, thank you for your question. Well, in usual situations, we can take other options as a practice-based option, practice-based learning, including visiting planetariums or star parties and so on. However, unfortunately, in this year and in the last year, because of the COVID-19 problem, we couldn't take such an option. So our investigations are based on only the classroom lectures. Of course, in future, we would like to try such kind of other options.
Thank you, Karino-san. From our colleague Kentaro Yaji-san, in Japan, many senior people take class actively in Open University. Can you use this Open University system in your activities, including online ways of teaching?
Yes. I'm checking only in Japanese cases, but I know that in Japan there are several open universities which have astronomy courses, and some of them are conducted by my friends. So after this bad situation of COVID-19, I'd like to try to contact them, and I will take ankate souvenirs, ankate and some surveys, and I will increase our sample and try to investigate in the same way, but in future work.
Thank you, Karino-san. From our colleague Mariana Gomes, do you think that involving cultural aspects in the astronomy teaching process is a positive point for senior participants' engagement?
Yes, it's very interesting point, but well, as I said, the motivation and the purpose of the learning of the senior citizens are not studied yet. So actually, we don't know how to teach, how to conduct senior citizens at the present. So in future, we have to consider such kind of engagement or in collaborations between such kind of teaching method, educational method, and so on with the astronomical education, astronomical learning for senior citizens. So thank you for your question.
So much, Karino-san. We have time for one more question, and it's from our colleague Tilina that says, Karino-san, very important effort. I was wondering if you evaluate the activities with elderly citizens. If so, how?
Yeah, well, in previous studies, it is said that elderly citizens tend to learn histories or classical literatures and so on. However, in previous studies, it is not studies. It have not been studied about the tendency of senior citizens that what kind of natural science subject they want to study. So now we are just investigating such kind of their tendencies. However, at the present, even the sample size of our study is still small, but some of them prefer to learn natural sciences, including astronomy. So we will continue to learn such kind of the tendencies and activities of elderly citizens.
Thank you so much, Karino-san, and thank you all our participants for the numerous questions. Unfortunately, we only can cover a few. And Karino-san, I would like to ask you if you could stay with us a little while longer and to go to our Q&A section and to go through all the numerous questions. And if you could answer all our participants by chat, we would appreciate it. Or in the Q&A section itself by answering the question directly. Thank you so much again for your time. And thank you. We will now move to our next plenary speaker, Cesare Pagano, that will address in their talk the Inclusive Outreach Subworking Group, sharing, learning, experimenting, and connecting.
Hi everyone, my name is Cesare Pagano. I am an amateur astronomer based in Italy, General Secretary of the National Association of Amateur Astronomers, and I coordinate the IAU Inclusive Outreach Subworkgroup. I'm here today to introduce our subgroup, what we do, and what are the opportunities that it offers for all. This work is the result of the effort of many people that you see listed as co-authors. First of all, why inclusive outreach? 3 key points. Science, the scientific method, is a key element in our culture as human beings. It helps us being better citizens as it shapes our mind to intellectual honesty, and it trains us to practice curiosity and logic. Astronomy has always been the most appealing science, therefore it's the best attractor for people, especially young people, to science. Moreover, it involves many scientific disciplines. People with disability must not be excluded from this chance. It would be very unfair. So, to summarize, we can say that inclusive outreach is about democracy, and this is our motivation. Let's talk about what we mean by inclusive outreach. In one sentence, it's about removing physical obstacles and adopting the right language, communicating the right way, so that everyone can participate. Let's expand a bit to cover the basics. First of all, it is about using a proper environment, remove physical barriers, choose the right context, and set it up appropriately. Then it's about using multiple communication channels so that everyone can follow. For instance, information must be available both visually and verbally. Moreover, we have to explain the concepts in a way that can be understood. For instance, by using physical models that can be touched and looked at. 3D models, or better 4D models that reproduce also the time dimension, the movement. And by the way, this works for all, not just for people with disabilities, as we often deal with complex spatial concepts. Intellectual disabilities is a more articulated area, as there are many different kinds that require different approaches. There is a short introductory video that you may want to look at on the IAU Inclusion website, and we give the links at the end. As a side note, you may have noticed that this presentation is with high contrast colors for people with low disability. Now, a few words about what an inclusive activity looks like. First of all, an important aspect is that inclusive activities are designed to be enjoyed by all. They are not designed exclusively for people with a specific disability. They must be designed to allow autonomous participation as much as possible, also to people with disabilities. They are not something to be scared away, though, as they can be learned step by step. It's only a matter of taking small steps out of our comfort zone, start with simple things, gain experience, and grow. At the end, they give great sense of accomplishment to both the people participating and to those organizing the activities. When you hear a person who was born blind telling you that they finally understand the meaning of sunrise and sunset, it's something you will remember. There are many individuals, associations, institutions who develop the skills, tools, and experience on inclusive outreach around the globe. Some very creative ones to design and build new tools to explain eclipses, Earth movements, constellations, and so on. If all this experience and knowledge could be put together and made readily available to all, it would be an incredible asset for the global community, just by sharing what is already there. This is where our group comes into play. Let's talk about our work group. The official name is IAU Inclusive Outreach, parentheses, Inspiring Stars, close parentheses. And it is a sub-work group of the Executive Committee Work Group Astronomy for Equity and Inclusion. It is one of about 8 subgroups started in 2020 by the Executive Committee Work Group to be operationally more effective. Our work group is focused on outreach practices that are inclusive for people with disabilities. It is a long-term program that takes the heritage of the 2019 Inspiring Stars project that ran a successful itinerant exhibit. Our very goal is to facilitate the development and broad adoption of astronomy inclusive practices in outreach. After less than a year, the group counts 32 members, 14 of which are active contributors to the group activities that we discuss in this presentation. We have a representation from 17 countries and 5 continents to testify how much the community feels the importance of this topic and how much people become passionate about this topic once they start. Let's take a look at how we have designed to pursue our goal. As said, our main purpose is the development of inclusion practices and their adoption. This has 2 key elements, which are sharing and community. Sharing the knowledge and the experience is a way to grow faster together, and community is a way to make this common knowledge actually used and relevant in the field, to make it known instead of sitting on a website. These were and still are our priorities. Other than that, we want to link with and involve the major associations of people with disabilities worldwide. Institutions like the European Blind Union, It is important as they can provide the knowledge we need to do the right things in the right way, and also because they can connect our efforts with the communities of people with disabilities. Finally, we also want to develop excellence to encourage further experiments and to find new ways to expand the inclusive outreach practices. For example, in 2020, there were some experiments about online inclusive activities due to the contingent pandemic, of course. As said, our first priority was sharing a community. And this explains the choice of our first deliverable, the Inclusive Outreach Starter Kit. In fact, the experience tells that the main deterrent, the main obstacle usually is fear. Fear of a new language, new interactions, new questions that may be asked, and most importantly, fear to fail. With this kit, we try to make people feel confident in their first steps. The kit includes two key components, plus, of course, the support of our workgroup. First, very practical operational good practices based on 10 years experience on the field from various outreach teams. Second, a set of 3 simple activities based on low-cost tools that can be built with some basic manual skills, all this with step-by-step instructions. Let's look at these elements in some more details. Good practices are very concrete suggestions to guide through all phases, from organizing to conducting an event or an activity. To give a feeling of what we are talking about, let me mention some of the answers we find in the document. How to choose and set up the room for an activity or a class with people with vision impairments. How to drive the hand of a blind person for the tactile exploration of an object. How to prepare a session with sign language interpreters. How to organize a number-serving session for people on wheelchair, telescope modifications, target selection, setup, conducting the observation. As you can see, it's very practical, useful stuff to be prepared and not to fear the first experience. But it is also useful to those with already some experience because it is a rather complete document. Coming in the near future, there is a new chapter on online activities. Here are the 3 basic activities included in the kit. They are tactile constellations, a set of stars of different sizes in scale, and a 5 meters rope that reproduces the solar system in scale. Simple models that can be built with a very low budget, in the order of tens of dollars, simple manual skills, but still there is quite a bit of science that can be explained with them. They have been used successfully on the field for several years now. The kit is available from the Inclusion Workgroup website. The link is at the end of the presentation. On the same website, there are many more tools with different complexity and cost level that you can browse through. After a few months of our group existence, the list of things we would like to do has grown much faster than the list of things we were able to complete, which is a good thing. This slide lists several of them. Let me mention some we are trying to get started in the short term. Grow the community and gather more resources. We know there is much more around in terms of assets and experience, and we would like to connect with them and share with all. Evolve the repository of tools and resources to be more effective. As the database grows, we would like to introduce more advanced categorization and search capabilities to make it more usable. Arrange a yearly symposium, a way to get together regularly, share what we learned, and design the next steps. Arrange specific education. Good practices are a good start, but having real classes developed possibly with the support of associations of people with disabilities would be more effective. Define metrics to measure our activities and their impact on society, to be aware of where we are doing good and where we need to improve. And much more. Anyone who wants to contribute is always welcome. What can you do to help? At least one of these 3 things. Even if you don't have time to invest in your experience with inclusive outreach, you can at least tell others. It will be great help for us. Then, if you want to start practicing inclusion in your outreach activities, you just found a community that can help you. Please do give it a try and let us know how it worked. We are always interested to hear your feedback. And by the way, help us spread the word. Finally, if you have experience with inclusion practice or if you want to contribute to our activities that we mentioned, you are welcome to join the subWorkgroup. And please, in any case, help us spread the word. Here is how to stay in touch. You can follow the IAU Astronomy for Equity and Inclusion Facebook page, where we will post regular updates about our activities, availability of resources, call for help, and so on. We are also working to set up a Facebook group so that it will be easier for the community to share information. We have a dedicated page on the IAU Astronomy for Inclusion and Equity website, and there you can find the introductory video, the starter kit. On the website, you can find many more useful resources and information. For any kind of information or inquiry, there is a dedicated email address, which is iau-inclusiveoutreach@uai.it. And yes, the domain is uai.it. It's not a mistake. This closes our session. I hope you found this information valuable, and please do help us spread the word. If there is any question, please do ask now or at a later time via email. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cesare, for the wonderful presentation and for being here with us today live and to answer some of our participants' questions. So I would like to first start by a question from our colleague Kelly. Do you involve the audiences in the creation of these activities and resources? If so, how?
I'm sorry, I missed the first word.
Of course, no problem. Do you involve the audiences in the creation of these activities and resources? If so, how?
Yeah, actually, for now, we are collecting existing experiences and resources, and they were created and tried on the field. So it's not something that we are starting on a piece of paper. Our first step is to share existing experiences. And let's say those have been tried on the field, improved, involving participants and people with disability and so on. How do we involve people with disability? I mean, each team around the world does it its own way. In many cases, through associations of people with disability who provide both the expertise and the links with the community. I hope I answered the right question.
Yes. Thank you, Cesare. Thank you so much. The next question is from our colleague Mariana Gomes. How did you evaluate the developed tools and the engagement of the BVI people in the pandemic?
The pandemic has been really tough because these inclusive activities involve touching, being in close contact because tactile exploration. So what we could do, some teams started some experiments about online inclusive activities, and that's a very challenging area. And actually, there is one session I know about one of these experiences, so that also people with hearing impairment or low vision could participate at the same time. So it's not something specific for one target. That's the only thing we found we could do in this period.
Thank you, Cesare. We have time for one more question from our colleague Annalie Pacheco Blanco. Where can we find this starter kit?
It's on the last slide of the presentation. Before, thank you. There is the link to the IAU inclusion website, and there is a dedicated page with the material we mentioned.
If I may suggest, Cesare, perhaps you can post the link in our chat group, or even answering in our Q&A, answering directly to Annalie. So perhaps this is a question by our other participants, so they will have direct access to the website. I want to thank you again for joining us live, and also to our colleagues for placing their questions in our Q&A section, and to invite you, if you'll stay with us a little bit longer, to explore both the chat and the Q&A in case there are more questions that the ones we could address here in this time slot. Thank you so much, Cesare.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And now I would like to ask my colleague Samir if our colleague Evgenia is ready, because we were experiencing some issues with the video.
Yes, Lina, unfortunately, we don't have connection to Evgenia. So we would probably move it to a slot slightly later and announce it in the chat.
One of the options will be, because today, as I mentioned earlier, this plenary session is a bit different than the other days. We have two times, one first part now, and another one at 5:30 UTC, AM UTC. So perhaps we will move this slot later on to the second part of this plenary session. In any case, as Samir explained in the beginning, in our home section of our page in Hopin, you will find all the latest news and our announcements. So we will post any updates there, because we really want to have our colleague Evgenia with us today. So we won't miss that opportunity, even if we have to adjust slightly our program. So I want to thank you all for being here in this first part of our plenary session number 3. And now I would like to invite you all to move for the next half an hour to our networking area, to our e-poster area, and take this opportunity to meet our colleagues, to let yourself be inspired by the numerous work and fantastic people that we are fortunate to have with us today. Thank you so much, and see you later. Bye-bye.